Hey everybody, welcome to our next installment of our cast reunion series here at the CTC. We are talking with the cast of Sweeney Todd. I feel weird saying that show in such a upbeat manner because it's a very scary show. But it was a fantastic show and a show that we're really proud of. And I'm excited to talk to the cast about what it was like to make it. So let's get right to it. I'll have each of you introduce yourself, say what character you played, and then you can pass it off to whoever you want the next person to be to introduce themselves. So how about Jason? Why don't you start?
Hi, I'm Jason, and I played Sweeney Todd. Eden.
Hi, I'm Eden Castile, and I played Mrs. Lovett. And Allison.
Allison King, I played the beggar woman, JR.
Hello, I'm Rick Casey, also known as JR, and I was Beetle Bamford. Maggie.
Hi, I'm Maggie Papa, and I played Joanna. Caitlin.
I'm Caitlin, and I was the assistant stage manager. Terry.
I'm Terry, and I played the awful, despicable Judge Turpin. So Chris.
I'm Chris Simpson, and I directed the show.
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did.
And this is my cat who wasn't in the show, but she wished she would have been if she could have tried. She's just gonna be here. It's just a Zoom. It's not a Zoom without my cat jumping in.
Love it.
Anyway, thank you all for coming. I will start out for those of you who aren't familiar with the show, Sweeney Todd. Chris, could you just briefly describe what the show is about?
Oh my gosh, I can try. I'm sure they'll all correct me if I leave out the part that they were fond of. But basically, it's about it's a London. What year? Anyone know what year, decade it's set? Like 18 something.
1840s, I think, from the
Yeah.
traditional costuming. I'm
Cool.
also a history teacher, so.
There you go. Allison was a resource in the room at the time. And so it's set in the 1840s, and it's basically about a man who comes back to London having been away for a long time. And we find out that he was here and had a wife, and they were separated, and she's gone, and he believes she's dead. Yeah. And he comes back, and I don't know, he meets a bunch of despicable people who have wronged him and were the reason that he was sent away, and he wants to get his revenge. And as a barber, he basically gradually murders them. But he, in doing so, he meets Mrs. Lovett, Eden, who is running a pie shop, and they she sort of seduces him, both romantically, somewhat against his will, because he's not really there on a love mission, and also seduces him into, feeding the meat of the victims of his to her customers as meat pies. Anyway, along the way, he accidentally kills Allison, the beggar woman, who it turns out is his wife, who was not actually dead.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, he kills her in haste. And then when that is figured out, that's a terrible, sad moment. And there's like a little child who gets caught up in it and ends up covered in blood at the end, having witnessed the death of and or killed everybody who was left, basically. And it's brutal and horrific. And being by Stephen Sondheim, it has fantastic and extremely challenging music. So it's basically an opera. There's almost nothing spoken the whole way through. And it is a monster of a play to stage. It is enormous in its scope, both in terms of the storytelling and just the number of characters and feats you have to pull off. So it was pretty ambitious when we tried to do it, and we somehow made it happen with this incredible group of people. And also for history for the theater, it was by far the most successful show we had ever done, but also when we went into it, by far the biggest risk we had ever taken. So it was a really big swing. And then we just got very lucky that all the right people fell in the right places at the right time. And it was a absolute home run that, you can never be totally sure, but like in some ways saved the company. We'd had kind of a tough year, and we were walking on eggshells, and swung big. And it basically was an inflection point in our trajectory. So pretty big moment for us.
What
Chris,
year was it again? 2015? 2015. Yeah.
Yep.
Seems like a lifetime.
Chris, having
ago.
done Assassins prior to that, did you find that to be a template for what you were able to do with Sweeney Todd as far as the orchestration, that minimalist orchestration and the staging of it?
I actually think so. So Jimmy Calitri directed Assassins, our first musical in the theater, but actually 3 years earlier, Ryan Hartigan directed The Last 5 Years, and we did that at the Towers. That was our first actual musical. And I think the combination of the experience of the two kind of gave us the confidence to think we could do it. But Assassins, the team for that were a lot of people who we knew but weren't really like insiders to the company or anything, and so they came in with outside skills, did a lot of incredibly good work, and then kind of like left. So we hired them and we loved them and we're all still friends, but I don't know that it actually brought as many skills into the company as you might have expected, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I mean, obviously we learned a lot, but I think Sweeney Todd was probably ill-advised. Like we probably weren't ready to do it. We just did it anyway.
As far as for the rest of the cast who was doing the show, it's obviously a really legendary show. Was there any of you that it was just a dream show that you've always wanted to do, and that or was it a show you were afraid to approach? Or Eden?
My God. Yeah. I went out for a different part and that I thought I was perfectly suited for. And then got called back from Mrs. Lovett, who was not on my radar at all. And then when I read about her, because I just thought, oh, those low-voiced women play her. And I don't have that kind of a voice. But then reading a little bit of it, I really wanted to play her. And it was really stunned and happy to get to do that. And then to get to work with all of these people was a dream come true. So I think that for all of us, like the whole rehearsal process, we all kind of wondered, is this really going to work? And all those times that we spent at Jean's house, rehearsing the music and working our way through the music and realizing what a beast of a score it was. But I always felt taken care of, and especially with Jean there. Mm-hmm. And then after the first couple of shows, I think we all looked around and realized, oh, this is really good. So
I can piggyback on that. There was a moment, and Jason, this was you, we were rehearsing one of the many counterpoint moments, and it was really tricky because the time signature is so strange and everything's off the beat, and I'm not a trained musician, so it was just really just fighting hard to get this right. And we got it right at one point, and you just went, yeah! And that was the first moment I felt, okay, I feel good. I feel good about this.
Sounds pretty on brand for me.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because looking back, we can see that it was such a successful show, and it seems like it accomplished what the theater needed and wanted it to do, both from an artistic standpoint and from a business standpoint. But for the rest of you, was there a moment when you kind of knew that you had it, that you were accomplishing it, or did you have to wait for the audience to tell you that for a couple of weeks? Did you ever feel like it until the end, that you really like had it?
I think one of the challenges with me, and Chris called me out on this, make eye contact with the audience. And being in such a small space, that is not my comfort zone at all. But once I got into the habit of doing that, it kind of became part of the feel of the show, if you will. And I think Chris is awesome at taking us out of our comfort zone and saying, yeah, cool, but try this now. And that I found really challenging, but also really liberating.
We practiced the opening a lot. Do you remember that?
Every night we'd run it before the show, which is not a good habit to be in, but we needed it for that show.
Mm-hmm. You're that staff that you kept on banging.
Yeah. Well, the dynamics of that, and that's what made that number as successful as it was. And some of the other group numbers, you really stressed the dynamics of it, which I think gets overlooked. And a lot of productions in general, and this production specifically. And Allison and I actually, because it's Rhode Island, had done this show before in college together.
We did not do the dynamics at all. And I know
no, it was just a blistering over your head version of it. Yeah, yeah.
I think. Oh, sorry.
Maggie.
Speaking of that, go ahead.
I just remember it was like Tech Week, and we had a lot of weak parts of the show, And we spent, instead of doing a run on like the Thursday before our final dress or something, we just took all the weak parts and made them the strong parts. And I think that just totally changed the game.
What about that?
I wanted to give credit a second ago. The show, Dean as music director, who we will talk about in a moment, I'm sure, whose contributions to the show were like utterly invaluable. But she had pushed dynamics a bit throughout the process, but we didn't really focus on it that much. And I have to give credit to Matt Requintina, who was a friend of the company at the time, who just came to a dress rehearsal and afterwards like, this is good. You people are gonna like this. You're not using dynamics as much as you could. Anyway, I'm gonna go get dinner. See ya. And I was like,
So mad.
and like he said that, and then I was like, oh no. And then that was the focus, and that became the signature of the show. And to Maggie's point, that was when I figured that out as a director. I realized like, oh, you don't need to do a run the night before. The actors want to. My God, the actors want to have one more like safety like check. Okay, we can do it. But that isn't, if that's not the most important thing, making the actors like feel like, okay, we did it. Do the more important thing, which is to take the worst stuff in the show and make that really good. And then the next night, take whatever the new worst thing is and make that really good. And that's how we basically warmed up every night, was fixing whatever we thought was the weakest thing we had at that point, which is why the show was so good at the end. So thanks for saying
So I was going to say, I was like that dynamic and tying into when I knew we had it, or when it felt like we really had it, was after that. I think when Chris had basically said, try to be as quiet as you can while singing it, so the audience has to lean in to really hear you. And the first time we really did that, I mean, I think all of us afterwards were kind of like, holy cow, that actually worked. And from there on, I mean, I think that was really a big turning point.
Locksmith.
Was a very funny line.
It was very funny. And I remember Chris saying, he said, this theater is really, it's really easy to make very, very soft words come out. And so every night to see how soft can I make that? And it still worked. And they always laughed, no matter how quiet it was, because the acoustics really favored that.
What was the line that you just said?
Locksmith.
Oh yeah.
Was my follow-up.
Yeah.
Because it's a really terrible joke.
It was.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Like going along that, it seems like, I think Chris has talked about this like to me before, about how the process of Sweeney Todd was really special because it was always kind of pushing yourselves really far. Like just doing the show is pushing yourself, but there was this constant idea of like, we have further to go, we can still go further. Even during the course of the run, I think you were still rehearsing. You were, like you say, you still ran the opening number every single night. So can you all talk about what it was like to be in a rehearsal process like that, where you were always kind of being pushed to the limit? What that felt like?
I can think of an example. When I hear artists talk about, oh, I'm going to push something to the limit, I think there's a misnomer, or at least I take the misnomer, that what is meant by that expression is I'm going to drive something as hard as I can. And that to me is not necessarily what pushing a thing to the limit might mean. It could mean that, but it could also mean retracting something as far as it can be retracted, in the case of, say, dynamics. And Eden and I both are operatically trained singers. So in a room that, I mean, I'm a loud person, right? And every stage I've ever sung on, I have to sing over an orchestra and to the guys 500, feet behind me. And so in that room, that skill set isn't particularly useful. So you learn to retract as much as well. That is the expansion of this idea of pushing something as far as it can go. But at the same time, I think when you find the thing you're pushing for, you know to stop pushing. And the example I can give of that, it was Tech Week, I think, Eden and Chris, when we staged Little Priest. I think it was Tech Week.
It was Tech or past Tech. It was after Tech.
It was like 3 days to opening or something ridiculous. Like
we stayed after.
This iconic, I mean, ostensibly the most iconic moment of the show. And we hadn't even touched it. I mean, musically, we both knew it, but we hadn't figured out what we were going to do for staging. And so we started with this very silly kind of typical Broadway staging, right? The way you would imagine it begin with the knife and the rolling pin up in the air, da-da. And it just didn't work. Just didn't work. And Chris and I are over in the corner, he's coaching and we're bantering back and forth. And Eden pops up and goes, "Hey guys, this song is foreplay. You know that, right?" And we both went,
Never heard of that.
"Yeah, it is." And from that moment forward, we knew what that song had to be. And that's what evolved it. And from there, we knew what direction to push. Because then we had a way to define why these characters would be, aside from Broadway spectacle, why are these characters on this stage singing this song? What are they driving towards?
Yeah.
I think it's really funny is I think Sondheim may have been intended it that way, and he never actually did it. We did. I've never seen any other production do it like the CTC did it. And I think it's the only way it should be done.
Well, I joke a lot that my greatest skill as a director of musicals is that I don't really like, or that I actively dislike Broadway and the very showy style of everything. The fact that I hate musicals, but respect good ones is like in the way that I direct them. And so in that case, I was pushing you guys to find what it's about, not just these two creepy, sadistic, desperate people take a moment to joke and sing a big number. Like that doesn't really play for me.
You were threatening to cut the whole thing.
Yeah.
And which was horrifying to me. And so we had to figure out some way to justify its existence. So that was how we did it.
It was an important moment is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it did more than that. I think it helped us figure out what our iteration of these characters were and who they were to each other relative to how we were presenting this show. And in addition to that, it gave us something that, like you say, no other production ever really done that. I mean, people come to see Sweeney Todd because they know Sweeney Todd. And when you get to know something, you want it to be the way you know it. And so it takes a lot of bravery to present something well-known and beloved in a new light that isn't, this crazy Regia Theater kind of thing, right? Like it's still vital the way we did it. It wasn't radical.
People came back again and again to see it.
Yeah.
People came
because of that.
I did.
Yeah.
I saw it twice.
Yeah.
I remember another song, By the Sea. Chris wasn't crazy about that either. I mean, because we all know Chris musicals are like, no, not good.
So there are a lot of good songs in that show. I'm just saying that By the Sea is not one of them. That's all.
Yeah. And so again, had to justify its existence. And I wanted to do it kind of Angela Lansbury style. And then you kept on saying, no, more sadistic. And I wanted it to be a sweet moment. And you denied that. You said, there's no such thing in this show. So it ended with, her with the knife pretending to kill somebody. And that was what made Sweeney happy. And she kind of bought into it. Again, it was a kind of ending that nobody else did, but it worked really well.
It seems like there's maybe part of the reason why this show and a lot of shows are done in such a broad manner is that it protects you from getting into the real darkness of the show. Because this show is very dark. Obviously, it's dark. It's about cannibalism, but you can remove yourself from cannibalism because, that's not real. Like, most people don't, do that, really. So it can be a fantasy. But there's a lot of other stuff in this show that is really nasty and very uncomfortable. And I don't know if any of you want to talk about what it was like to kind of go into some of those, especially all of you had moments of that. Oh my gosh, all of you had moments of very awful things that you had to do or you had to experience on stage. And I wonder if you can talk about what it was like to kind of go into those spaces.
Can we let Maggie and Terry have this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a Maggie and Terry conversation.
Listen, I didn't think about or know what was happening on the other side of that door.
Good.
And that's how
My God.
Nor should you have.
I don't know if you want to talk about, for those people that don't know Sweeney Todd, your character dynamic there.
Well, yeah, it's the judge has adopted Joanna more or less, but is grooming her this entire time to be something other, and that on its face is disgusting. But let's take as a plot point, it's disgusting, but then it's actually acted upon. And there's the pictures. There's an iconic picture that Seth took of Maggie and I on the other side of this door, up on the platform. And every time I see a show at CTC, I'm like, oh, there's that platform. And I'm on one side of the door. Judge Turpin's on one side of the door. Joanna's on the other side of the door, being sweet as she always is. And the judge is acting out his thwarted desires in a rather physical manner. And props to our costume designers, because I had a pair of pants in that show that we affectionately call Flappy. And it lent itself to the action that was required. And not everybody who does Sweeney Todd goes all the way with that. And that song gets cut a lot because it's atonal at best, and it's very difficult to sing. And and when I had to do it in college, I played the same part, but didn't do it right. I didn't get it. It was just I had some redemption, felt, well, let's do this the way it should be, talking about taking it to the extreme. And it was disgusting. And it as an actor, it felt, okay, I'm really stretching here. But as a father, I just felt every night I had to apologize to Maggie, because after that disgusting moment, I had to immediately face her and then compliment her on her gauze gowns and her soft linen gowns and everything. I creeped myself out because it was so gross. And but as long as the audience felt uncomfortable watching it, then I felt that I had done what was needed for that part, because then when Turpin finally gets killed, there's the payoff for the audience, because you hate him so much, so very much.
And it's brilliantly written, because the text and especially the music are this struggle where even the judge knows it's wrong, and he hates that he feels this way, but he's gonna act on it anyway. And it's really torturous. It gave Terry a lot to play with, and he did a wonderful job.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
And there are 3 Joanna songs in that show.
Yeah.
3 Joanna songs.
It also helps us see how much, but the fact that you went as far as you did with it, like the fact that we really felt this, the sexual energy of it, and like the peaks and whatnot of that, as well as the self-loathing and the religious aspects of that. It was really a lot. It just makes the danger that Joanna's in so much more real. Whereas if it's a little cartoonish and safer, the act is not uncomfortable, the audience isn't uncomfortable, but then Joanna's not really in danger either. And it's just like the whole plot kind of hinges on her being in this terrible place. And also Sweeney Todd's first murder, or no, the murder of you, and not the first one actually, but feels like justified. And you're actually on his side for a long time while he does really bad things. And it's because this song makes you even worse than him. And I think it must be rare for a production to really go that far on that.
Yeah, I think it is rare, because it's like nobody wants to do that. But like the point of theater is to make the audience feel things. And I think we hope not to at the CTC, but a lot of theater makers shy away from going that extra mile to make the audience really feel the thing that is intended in the script, because it's just too hard, or it's too uncomfortable. So I applaud you for going there. It's hard. It's not easy.
It's hard to do it and have everybody feel good about it. And I think a thing I'm really proud of on that show is that we did that in a way that no one in the cast, to the best of my knowledge, obviously people always might have experience that they don't share, but we worked pretty hard to make sure everybody trusted one another, felt safe about all of the.
In your direction of that scene, I felt safe that whole time when we actually blocked that, such as it was. So and that, that was it. And that's down to the direction. It was a safe space to do that in.
I agree entirely. In fact, I know that Eden and I, because Lovett and Sweeney are, inextricable, we checked in every 20 minutes. It was almost to the point of absurdity. But the great thing about it is when you go through an experience like this, and you spend so much emotional energy trying to portray a thing, I mean, Tam, you asked earlier about dark spaces and having to like, what did it take as an actor to go there? My wife will tell you it took me a month to de-Sweeney myself, and not in any sadistic way, just little things like my irritability, my the way I would walk into a room, those kind of things, right? It had gotten so ingrained, but it didn't really cause any grief because I kept checking in with folks. Allison and I would have conversation. Eden and I talked all the friggin' time. I mean, between scenes, immediately after getting off stage, you okay? You good? You know, the fear I always had was after I shoved her in the oven, I could never go around the back and be, hey, are you all right? It hurt you, right? You're good. You know.
It was a very well padded oven.
Now, having said that, as soon as I shoved you in the oven, the next thing I do was go by and smack Terry in the face.
Because he was lying on the ground. We were trying
dead. He didn't care.
Poor guy. Poor guy.
Grunt, growl, something.
I had already been through that trapdoor slide. What were you going to do to hurt me?
There were a lot of bruises in this show. I think everybody had quite a few bruises.
There were too many bruises, some of which I didn't realize were as bad as they were until after the show was over and I got like brought into your backstage experience. Like, oh yeah, everyone was getting bruised on that thing. That is not, to me, that is one of the biggest regrets of that production. That is not how a show should go. So I think I apologize that's how it all went down.
Well, I think it was everybody committed to it. That's where the bruises came from, is people weren't trying to make it like, oh, I don't want it, people were going for it.
I will say I tried very hard not to launch anybody down. Like when you pop the chair, it was always a controlled fall, but some of you are shorter than others. And Allison didn't tell me that this was a problem until week before the end of the show. She's like, yeah, I'd get to the bottom and you'd let go and there'd be another foot to go. And I'm like, you could have told me this.
Can you just describe what you're talking about? Because I was going to ask, like,
Right.
kind of segue into the technical elements anyway, with the barber chair and like what it took to make that and what it was like to slide down that.
Caitlin?
Yeah, so the way that this stage was set up is you like go through the lobby doors, and if you're going on stage, you go up a ramp and there's a second platform on the stage, and up there is the barber chair, which actually got carried in and screwed down during a number. It was during the like opening of Act 2, which is this crazy mess where they're finally feeding everybody the meat pies, and Riley Cash and usually Owen Gilmartin would walk in with the chair, carry it up, and screw down the chair during that song. And at the foot of the chair is a little hatch, which is a trapdoor with like a slide basically attached to the opening of that trapdoor. So you'd slide down, and we had a bunch of different padding down at the bottom. And so if a person was killed during the show, Sweeney would slit their throat and then kind of lift up the chair, and they would slide through the trapdoor down, and then they would crawl out through the back of the platform, which was open off to the back of the stage. So it was definitely a journey for that thing. But I never actually had the pleasure of experiencing going down the slide. So I don't know if it was super steep or, how that all went, but yeah.
It was horrifying at first, and then once you get used to it, because before every show, okay, we're doing fight call, and you'd go down, and I know Jason would take my arm and kind of slow me down a little bit because I am so short, and then I'd land and I'd kind of go over to the other side, still underneath the platform. And Terry, I know you would just come down so violently, it would be like boom, and I'm like, oh jeez. So I don't know what it was, but maybe he just pushed you. I have no idea, but
don't blame me.
It was I just did a free fall. It was basically the biggest trust fall ever. It just, because you wanted it to look satisfying to the audience. And let's not forget the squibs. Caitlin gave us our squibs every night.
Yeah.
So that was a matter of getting the squib to go off, and then you go down. And anybody remember the squib rehearsals?
Let's talk about the blood.
Concept?
Yeah,
I was a bloody show.
The journey of the blood is kind of interesting because it was actually it was a collaboration between me and Marissa, the costume designer for the show. And the way that we originally wanted to do the blood was whenever someone would go into the barbershop, they would get their like smock, and what we were thinking is we'd have a syringe with an open end attached to a tube that would be kind of like hidden in the barber smock. And so whenever someone's throat got slit, they'd just like have their hand up and they'd push the syringe and the blood would come out of their neck and onto the smock, and that would be that. There was a couple problems. I was the test person the first time around, and we realized that sometimes it's hard to tell if you're putting the smock on the right way. So when I pushed the syringe, we found out that it was actually facing me. So I got the blood like all over my shirt, like completely ruined it. So we had to go back to the drawing board. And I was everyone was super busy. Like this was a mammoth of a show. So I was tasked to like figure out the blood contraption. And I was totally at a loss. I didn't know what I should do. And I like happened to be in the restroom in our like green room rehearsal space, and there's a bunch of drawers. So I was like, might as well just look and see if there's anything that I can use. And there was a box of sandwich bags that had the fold over top. And I was like, oh, what if we just tied those up and you squeeze and they pop, and either Sweeney Todd could have it or the person who got their knife across their throat would have it. And that was in of itself a huge trial and error for the entire run of the show, because you never wanted to tie them too tight because then they'd be too pressurized, so they'd pop and they'd go everywhere. Everywhere.
The trumpet
All over the orchestra.
groove got
The
it on
number of times I
one
got
night.
blood into the pit.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was,
All over the trumpet player's book, all
Right.
over Jenny's book.
yeah, all in the trumpet player's book.
That book that had to be returned.
Which she loved that though. She was like,
Yes.
she was out of her mind delighted the night she was playing like the death theme and the blood splattered across
Yeah.
music. She was like, it's the perfect image of this show. We also got on the audience once, I think, in Tech Week.
Mm-hmm. There was one in the audience. We got it on our backstage curtains once. It, for some reason, the blood actually shot backwards. And then
I was gonna say, whenever I did it, they went all the wrong way. So that was probably my fault.
Looking for blood, no.
and there was actually we always did our best to clean up. And there was actually like a giant puddle to the side of the platform that I didn't find until I was like in a class at the theater, like a couple days after a show. So I had to clean that up in the middle of class. But yeah, it was definitely a journey, and it was hard to keep track of them because so many people needed them, so many people died at various points, so many people, one person couldn't have it in their hand because they'd have a song the previous scene. So it was also a chore for me to like kind of crawl around backstage, on stage, but just hidden, to plant the different packs where they needed to be. And yeah,
I remember at least one show. I'm sure it was more than this, but I remember one show. I had near the end, of course, people start popping off pretty immediately, and there were 2 or 3 deaths in a row. One of the deaths had happened down below where the blood pack would be on. I think it was mine.
Mm-hmm.
My eventual death, Sweeney's death, was on the lower level. So there was a blood pack down there that was just inside the curtain that I would reach to grab, and that one was not missing, but we had to rob it because one of the ones up top was missing, and I had to like communicate this somehow. I think I told the person as they were going down the chute, hey, tell Caitlin she needs to rob Peter to pay Paul right now. Because we were short one, and we had to like, this person has to die and blood has to fly. So, but
Remember the recipe for the blood? I just remember it had cocoa powder in it.
Yeah, actually over the years there's been many iterations of the blood because we've had a couple of bloody shows since Sweeney Todd, but the Sweeney Todd recipe specifically was corn syrup, the clear corn syrup, cocoa powder, blue dish soap, red dye, and sometimes to make it darker, I'd kind of add in blue dye as well because sometimes the red just looked too pink. And that was usually it. I think I've I've changed the recipe since to make it easier to manage, but
We've also now got mouth safe and like hair, like eye safe and clothing safe. And
After getting it in my eye, that was not
all
fun.
the time.
there
Thank
was
you, Jason.
You just glue
There was
your
no
eyelids.
blood in my eye,
there was a night that I thought we had cost Allison her vision.
but it was
I think that's something that
badass though, because when VW rises up and I had this blood and people were like,
And
Great,
after
great.
the show, everybody would take pictures. Like, don't wash the blood off. I need a picture.
Right.
We would all want these selfies
Every
of how
night.
gross
Yep.
we looked.
yep, blood selfies. I have a ton of them.
The first
I do
time I met
remember-
Ron Cowie was on the way out the door after one of the shows. Ron came around back with a couple of lights and took that picture of
That's
the five
right.
of us.
That was blood in your eye night.
That was
Blood
the first
night.
time that was the first time I ever met your husband, Eden, and he did not like me
No.
because he had just seen our performance of Little Priest. We get on fine now.
5 years later, all is forgiven.
It took a minute.
I do remember we've advertised in this Zoom call, but also anyone who's seen the show knows how bloody it is. And we actually had a cast member who's allergic to red dye. So there was also an added element of like we keeping everybody safe and like no one gets blood who doesn't already like use it, you know, like everyone gets it at the right time, that sort of stuff. Just to like, we made blood in like this a separate area of the backstage room just to be extra careful because it really was everywhere by the end.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't realize when they watch a show that has blood in it. Every show I've ever done that has blood in it is a thing. It is like the thing of the show is like, what about the blood? And I think like when we did Hamlet is not a bloody show. A lot of people die. It's not a bloody show, but it was like, oh, are we gonna have blood? No. Definitively, absolutely not. No. If you can avoid having blood, let's not do it because it's like an adventure.
The laundry alone.
Yeah, like every night. If you run a show 4 times a week, you have to wash the laundry every night. People don't realize that.
Also, because it's Sweeney Todd, and also because you want the blood to show up, there's a lot of white clothing. It's like, you know, period appropriate as well as more dramatic. So there were I think it was a 3-step process every night of like wash them once, wash them again, then like bleach 3 of them, which were made of silk. Like Jason's silk shirt was one of the craziest costume pieces I've ever seen, and it got blood on it.
Yeah, there was
So-
always a designated blood laundry bucket. Like we can wash your clothes, but if you have blood on any part of your costume, it's going in this one bucket and it's going immediately in the washing machine. So yeah, that was always a fun process.
I wonder if during the show, like, so now the show's up, it's running, it's going well. Were there points where there were specific things in the show that might not be obvious to the audience that you really looked forward to, like scenes that you really loved seeing, or scenes that you love doing, or scenes you love someone else doing over the course of the run?
So the answer is yes, too many to name. But I will go first and say that I thought my favorite part of the whole thing was when Sweeney first meets Mrs. Lovett. A customer. Wait, what's your rush? What's your hurry? Being on stage for that, none of you had a seat better than mine. It was so good. It was so good and hilarious. And I got to sit right next to her and eat that cracky ass biscuit. Excuse my language, but that biscuit was disgusting. I had to spit it out, and it was a whole thing. It was great. But no, that was, I mean, Eden is an easy person to fall in love with anyway. And through all that process, it was like, oh, why doesn't the world love this woman? Because they haven't met her yet. That's all. That's all. And from that point forward, the show always got better.
I remember that moment. I remember you terrifying me when you would start the what is it? When he goes bat crazy.
Epiphany.
Epiphany.
Right, Epiphany. Because you would come, Mr. Todd, and I was hunched over after having just done it, and then I would look at him and go, what?
And you made me jump out of my skin every single time, but I looked forward to it. I was good like that.
Well,
And then I would just get to watch you do your
Oh.
thing. And I got to be on stage to watch you, Mutual Admiration Society, but I didn't have to do anything. I just had to sit there and act terrified. And then the very first night, do you remember?
Oh shit.
Yeah, that's exactly what you said because you forgot.
I know. I screwed it up one time. So we talked earlier about the difficulty of this music.
Yeah.
Now, as it turns out, I'd been listening to Sweeney Todd, a performance by Emma Thompson and Bryn Tervel, of all people. I'd been listening to this performance for a year prior to this show. Before this show even went up for audition, I'd been listening to it. And so I'd been just kind of getting it in my head. So by the time I got to the show, I wasn't uncomfortable with the music. It wasn't nailed down yet, but I was like, okay, I know this piece pretty well. But in the Epiphany, there are two verses that start the same way, but they end differently. They go in different directions. And I started the first verse with the second verse's words, which mimetically got me in the wrong direction. And I stopped, and Gene stopped, the band stopped, and I realized what happened. And in the 75 minutes that was the 3 seconds it took me to figure it out, stage time, I went, shit. And I'll never, right off to the next chorus. And Gene, rest her ever loving soul, saw where I was, the band caught up, and we kept going.
Well, that's a great
Saved
transition
all
because
of us many times.
we have to spend some time to talk about Jean. And Jean Maxon Carpenter was a dear member of our company, and she music directed this show. She was so integrally involved with so many of our most successful shows, and especially this one. So I'll just open it up. What are some of your memories that stick in your mind? Or I know she had a really great way of making very intimidating music feel like you could do it. So if any of you had those moments where it's like, I don't know if I could do this, and Jean was like, yes, you can do it.
I'll start.
Yeah.
Jean was a dear friend. She was my son's piano teacher for 10 years. And the one song in the show I did not know was Beggar Woman's Lullaby, because no recording has it. So I'm like, oh, I have to sing this thing and I don't know what it is. And, and I'm like, Jean, I want to get this right. And there was another one in that Smoke, Sign of the Devil, City on Fire, that thing, where every single recording has it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go with what Mr. Sondheim put on the page. And she's like, you don't have to. I'm like, no, I want to do this. And she was just so encouraging with that, and with BW's Lullaby. And I cannot say enough good things about her. She was wonderful with all of us, and so encouraging, and with one beautiful sense of humor.
Yes.
By which you mean she loved bad jokes.
Oh God, absolutely loved bad jokes. And one of the things with her is she and I could have these whole conversations almost in song lyrics, and I find myself doing it. And there she is, she's getting back at me. She's saying I'm still here. So.
And Chris, I'm sure like having someone like Jean there made it, gave the confidence that you could do a show like this, produce a show like this at CTC. And you worked with her obviously on multiple shows. So what was it like as a director working with her as a music director? Was it complicated music?
It was a dream come true. It was perfection. She was like, okay, she and I sat down and talked a bunch of times before we decided that we were going to do it, because it was our first project together too. So it was a lot of firsts on that show. And we immediately understood that we both had similar values in music. We had some things that we wouldn't necessarily have done the way the other one would, but better than any other accompanist I've ever worked with. Just like we both value certain types of sounds, certain way of working with actors, certain things about the way lyrics tell a story, but also the way the music, supports and contrasts the lyrics. We always kept finding these like, oh, I also love that. And then we'd start referencing the same like weird music theory stuff that we did in our own different times. And we had so much fun finding out about one another's taste in music in general, and especially for musical theater, that by the time we got to the auditions, I was like, oh yeah, I've been working with this person for years. We're going to be great. And then you talk and we go through the audition process, and I'd just kind of look at her and be like, let's have this person read for this thing. And, she's like, oh, I see. Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. And then immediately knew not only what I meant, but then 3 steps ahead of me, how to, make that happen. And then the next thing. So it was just, it was so confidence inspiring all the way through. Anyway, finally we have the cast, we do the first sing through, and she's like, okay, for the next 6 weeks, I'll work with them. We'll see you in August, like, goodbye. and there's nothing better as a director than that. And then they all came back knowing all their music. So that was great. And then last thing that just stands out to me over and over again is the same passion for always working on stuff, always willing to take notes. I mean, Gene and I, and certainly 7, maybe 8 of the 9 people on this Zoom call have fairly large egos sometimes. And we all know that is a reason that I think people work at our theaters, that we want to be working against our own egos. We try not to play into that, but instead be like, okay, I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to try something new, and I'm willing to risk failure. And in the music world, that is much more rare than the theater world. And in the theater world, it's pretty rare. And so to find Gene, who was like, give me the notes. Like, I've been doing this longer than you have been, and I am a pro at this. Tell me what you want to change. I will go home and work on it. Tell me how you want to, what I do by my very nature that isn't working for this show, lay it on me, and I will find a way to change it, or to help someone with an even bigger ego than me, work on it too. And so she was so humble and flexible and brave in how she approached shows. And so when the music director is doing that, then everybody else has to fall in line. If the music director is like, no, we're not changing that, I like how it is, then everyone's like, oh yeah, we get to draw our own little personal bubbles and never have to be vulnerable or be challenged. But when the music director is like, oh great, yeah, okay, cool, I'll scratch all that and start something else, then everyone's like, oh, okay, we're just here to make a good product together. And it all becomes so much easier. And no other accompanist that I know is willing to do that as Gene was. So I don't know. There's like 100 more things I could say, but that
yeah, that sums it up. I mean, yeah, I never didn't work with her much because I don't do musicals much, but on a little bit of singing work I did with her, like she just makes you feel like you belong there. Like there's a lot of imposter syndrome, I think, in theater, especially like when you're doing such a big show, or you're doing a role you never played before, or you're kind of pushing yourself to your limit. You feel like, I don't know if I belong with these people. And she was like, you belong with these people. So that was always wonderful with Gene. With just a few minutes we have left, any final thoughts about the show, about what it meant to you, about things that have popped up in your memory over the last short amount of time that you were like a favorite part of the process, or a favorite part of the show, or a favorite ritual that you had during the course of the run? I know, like when I do shows, I always have a ritual. It's like usually a different ritual, but it's like whatever I do, like tech week of the show, before the show, I do the same thing. Like it could be like the same type of soup, like, oh, well, I ate chicken soup before the show, so I have to eat chicken soup now for the next one. I don't know if any of you have any of those things, or just final reflections about the show.
I ate the same thing before every show.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I had supermarket sushi and Green Goddess smoothie before every show because it worked. The show went well the opening nights. I said, don't change that.
Yep.
Yep.
Hot gin helps for more than just show nights.
That's right.
You got a little scratchy throat. Works really well.
You were giving us, who was giving us that? What were we drinking with the sore throats? We were.
Oh, oil of oregano.
Oil of oregano. Oh,
yes.
Yes.
Speaking of scratchy throats, the scariest moment I have ever had in a show I have ever done ever was in this show. We had somewhere in like week 2, week 3. We did a Thursday, a Friday, and a Saturday. And we did not have a Sunday.
Yeah. I remember this.
Eden, you remember this?
I remember this.
One of our cast members on the Wednesday of that week was diagnosed with strep throat. And on Thursday, I was like, I'm fine. On Friday, I was like, I think I'm fine. On Saturday, I said, something's going on. And on Sunday morning, where we did not have a show, I could not phonate. I couldn't even speak. And if we'd had a show that day, we would have had to have canceled. But we didn't. The next show was 5 days later. I went to the doctor. I got diagnosed with strep throat. And by the time the next show came, I'd healed. So God bless it. That did not become a problem. But I was really, really, really afraid to have to call Chris and be like, I can't sing. Sorry.
There's only a couple of shows that I think I could actually do every word of them still, and probably all of the blocking. And this is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can still run it. I can just close my eyes and I can run the entire thing. And if you had to put me on tomorrow, I could do it. And I would love to. It was such a fun ride. But you'd all have to be there.
I was just going to say, as a stage manager, I don't exactly have a pre-show ritual. Like I always have to eat the same thing or anything like that. Usually my pre-show ritual is setting up props and all of that stuff. But during the show, even though I was helped by some wonderful crew members, and we would always find time, because this was a mammoth of a show. It was definitely a marathon. There was always a lot of stuff that needed to be in different places and like supporting quick changes and all of this stuff. But one of my favorite things about stage managing, and one of the most rewarding things, is I don't know, like I'm in the lobby with Father Kelly and, you know, whoever's on the bar that night. And we're like, you know, we have a ritual of like singing along to this song, or like all being like, oh, we love this part of this song. Like we're all going to listen. Like we'd all gather in the lobby for the opening number every single night. At the like passing cast members, we'd all have our like same little rituals that we'd just be like, oh, you good? Just all of that sort of stuff is always my favorite as a stage manager. Like between all the stuff, we always found ways to like connect during the show and have fun with it.
Wasn't there a nightly like lip sync performance of Pirelli's Miracle Elixir with Father Kelly as Pirelli?
Yes.
Love to have seen that.
Damn.
The person playing Toby, the person playing Sweeney would change every night, but we'd always like get under Father Kelly's skin and like sing Pirelli to him.
That's fantastic.
That did feel like a common theme. There was a constant sense of celebration. Wherever you were in the show, if you were off stage or disengaged from your role, whatever it was, you were engaged with the show because you wanted, like, we were all rooting for each other in every conceivable way. I mean, I hated the moments where there weren't many, but there were a few moments where I would get off stage and not get to see like the whole the thing between Anthony and Joanna, their opening sequence with the birdcage, and he's falling in love with her. I never get to see that, but I always knew it was good. I always knew it would be good.
Yeah, I mean,
this is weird, but I always sat backstage. Whenever I was not on stage and not getting ready, I sat backstage. I might have fallen asleep in the oven during Tech Week a couple of times, but
Nice.
But there were always certain things I looked forward to, and I'd watch the shadows on the wall, you know, like when Jason, you'd kill somebody or, kill Pirelli or whatever it was. And there was these little moments I'd look forward to, and I'm like, oh, they did it differently this time, you know? And then at the end of Act 1, I'd always go back into the green room and be like, end Act 1, you know? So and it was just that. And I always appreciated too, at the beginning or before the show, I should say, the passing of the eye contact and, I will not let you fall and all that stuff. That was just beautiful. It was wonderful.
A lot of those theater rituals can feel only as important as the cast makes them. And I think this was one of the groups in my memory, in my career, that like really believed in the value of connecting in those ways before. So, you've been a part of that circle where the same words or the same exercises happen and it's okay. Or it maybe sometimes not even that, but this time it felt like people looking at each other and saying, I will be there with you for this show together tonight, and we will make the best thing we have ever made, and it will be wonderful. And it felt like that was a promise that was very sincerely felt every night, and that was really cool.
I always felt like every night was kind of like a party, or as Jason said, like a celebration. And I think one of the things that I've learned as a stage manager, doing a bunch of shows and a lot of them with a lot of serious content, is like, you really want to do justice to the shows, and you want to do everything right and have a good message and tell a good story, but also you don't want to like take yourself too seriously. you still want to like have fun and be in that show on that night with everyone else, whether you're on stage or backstage. So I always really enjoyed that for Sweeney Todd. I always felt like a real sense of community between everyone.
That seems like a great place to end it. I think that sums it up. I think when you see the work that you all put into the show, and then you realize what the process meant to you all and how hard you were working to, like Chris said, to make the best thing you've ever made, that shows. And I think the audiences really responded to that. So thank you all for doing that, for putting that effort forth, and for creating that show. I'm just really excited to have talked to you. So thank you so much. Did you want to say something else, Chris?
Yeah, just one last thing that's really important. This show was great because Jason and Eden and Terry and Maggie and JR and Allison, but it was also great because of and Jean and Maggie and Marissa and all them. But Steve Pacheco, Amelia Giles, Aaron Tapa, and Paige. What's Paige's last name? Paige Barry. I was gonna say the wrong thing. And there's one other
Alex
and Phil, the 5 ensemble people. Right. There's still other cast members who had like named roles that we haven't even talked about yet, like Alex and Ari. But the 5 who played the ensemble, which each meant for each of them playing like the chorus that would come out and sing to you, just like basically what's happening, but also sometimes playing other roles and stuff in the show. Like any one of them has the voice and the acting skill to be the lead in a show at our theater or anywhere, anytime. Like these are great singers. Like Paige and Aaron and Amelia and Steve and Phil. I mean, these are outstanding musicians who are just like, cool, I'm in the ensemble. I'm going to do an unbelievably good job at all times. So from the very beginning of the show, that dynamic that we were talking about, like the very quiet that got loud at the opening, it's like 13 or 14 spectacular singers filling a room that only one spectacular singer, like Jason was saying earlier, could easily blow out the sound in that room. But there's 13 of them, and they're all incredible. Like it just sets such a high bar that the ensemble was so good in that show. And then like just beat by beat, the way that everybody worked together like that, just we have to give credit to the rest of the cast because they did so much awesome work. It was really inspiring. And Alex Bermudez came in not really a singer, like he had a good voice but had not done much music, and basically Gene and he committed so hard that by the end of it he sounded like he could go record his album now. He's ready to go, and that was really cool too. So I just wanted to give them all credit because this show is nothing without them.
And we had 2 Pirellis.
True.
That's right. Stephen Grube filled in, and it was so adorable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think the process of creating really satisfying and memorable theater can be kind of elusive. Like we try every time, but I feel like it's this striving. You're striving to capture this thing, and some shows kind of capture it. Some shows come close. Some shows you feel real nice about, and some shows you kind of just grab it. And everything that you've talked about is kind of why is having a fantastic ensemble and having like a base material that is like an incredible classic, and approaching it in a way that's truthful and connected and honest, and really wanting to do justice to what the base material, what the music is telling you to do. All of that put together is so hard, but congratulations, because I think you all did it. You did a good job. So again, thank you all for sitting here with me tonight and reminiscing and telling me a little bit about your process. It was great to learn. And everybody out there, stay tuned for more cast reunions coming up in the coming weeks. So bye, everybody. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.